Somewhere in your mind, there is this invisible timeline where you think that because of your age, you should be further along, or you should be doing something different, or you should have all of these different successes. And then when you don't have them, you end up chalking them up as personal failures. And in reality, it really wasn't your timeline to begin with, because you were just kind of doing all those things because of your age, or what you thought you should be at that time or at that age. So today we're going to talk about something very simple, and it's called the age identity trap. And it is something that I've struggled with and I've overcome. It's definitely something that I believe, even in whatever season of your life that you're in, your age plays a huge role in your mind. Whether you're young and you want to start a business, or you're in your mid-30s and you're trying to, be established and get married, or you're in your late 30s or your early 40s thinking about maybe having kids, your age always has something to do with the personal failures that you chalk up on your mind. And again, age has nothing to do with your season and nothing to do really with your success. You can be mature at 18 and you can be immature at 40. So today we're going to talk about that age identity trap and really dive deep into making your age something that you don't think about, and instead actually using that as your superpower sometimes, and how you can turn that into your superpower in whatever season of your life that you're in. And at the end of this, we're going to use your age, okay, and help you use that tool for this exact season of your life and give you an advantage that nobody else in the room has. Welcome back to the Business of Becoming. I am your host, Stephanie. And if you're new here, I help high-achieving people who feel alone at the top find peace, purpose, and the next version of themselves. And honestly, we just talk about business, mindset, personal growth, and everything and anything that has to do with you becoming the best version of yourself in this season. Today's episode is for all of those who have ever had to question themselves and say, am I too old for this? Or am I too young for this? Or are people going to take me seriously because I'm not in their age group? And if you've ever questioned yourself or your authority or your leadership or anything because of your age and have limited yourself from walking into certain rooms or stepping into certain conversations because you think your age has, I guess, something to do with your maturity or something to do with your success, then this episode is exactly for you. Okay, it's going to hit a nerve because it's something that, again, I have found myself there so many times, especially when I was younger and starting out in business and all of these things. And even now in my mid-30s, well, let's take that back. I'm not in my mid-30s yet, right? No,
you're not. You're early 30s.
I am in my early 30s. Even though I've been feeling like I've been in my mid-30s since I was 13. But I genuinely think that today's episode will hit a nerve, and I really want to attack something that has created this culture of, people in business have to have peppered hair, and you have to have had trauma, and you've had to have had years of experiences. And I've caught myself so many times saying that, like, oh, I've been doing this for, X amount of years. And the truth is I have, but before I would say it because I needed to make sure that they understood how credible I was. And now I'd say it because I'm proud of it. And there's a big difference between saying something because you're proud of it and saying something because you just want some validation from somebody. Let's dive into really the age identity trap, and let's name it. So many people go through their lives without even naming this and without even knowing that it does have a name. And the reality is, once you name it, you can tame it. That's psychology 101. That's therapy 101. Once you can name something, you can start to learn how to tame it. Along the way, this age identity trap creates this false narrative for your life. It creates that by this time you should have this. By this time you should be, settled. And I don't know about you guys, but, I grew up in a Hispanic culture. So people got married young and they had kids young. My mom had, 4 kids pretty young, and all my aunts and uncles, they all had kids young. And if we go behind that generation, they all had more kids, even younger. So there was always this feeling of, feeling behind. And that's one of the things that we're going to get into when we talk about this trap, really. But it was this invisible timeline that I grew up in, that I felt like I needed to reach something by this age. I needed to reach success. I needed to, be settled down. And it was like this rush, And again, I've mentioned I'm the youngest out of four. And my older sister, she was married and, had kids and been with her, significant other since she was 15. And she got married at 21, the whole nine. I'm giving her all her personal story right now. But growing up under, that influence and obviously looking up to her, I already felt rushed so young. I felt like I had to get to this point in my life by the age that she was. And it was not a competition thing. It was just more of this false, invisible timeline that I gave myself, this invisible pressure that I put on my life. And so many of us do that, whether we're the first, child or we're the last or we're the only child. We put this false burden on ourselves to try and complete tasks that probably are not even supposed to be on our timeline. And that's the thing, right? Because we start thinking that we should be here and do this. And then when we don't get there at a certain time frame or age, really, we start questioning ourselves. Are we really worth it? Are we really, supposed to be here? And are we worthy of love? Are we built to have that kind of life? Or are we meant to have, a marriage or kids or whatever that looks like? Are we meant to be in business, right? That ultimately, what it does is that it creates this feeling in that age identity trap, which feels like you're falling behind. That feeling of just falling behind is the first thing that this age identity trap teaches us. And that's kind of how you can know you're in it, to be honest, is that feeling of being behind. That you start comparing yourself to maybe siblings, right? Or maybe other leaders that you see or people that you follow on social media, and you see this perfect version of their lives and what it should be. And you start saying, oh my goodness, like this person did that at this age and I'm already, 5 years older than them and I haven't gotten to that place. All of these things we start mounting on our shoulders, and it kills all of our creativity, our drive, our purpose, our will to even try. Because before we even think of trying at this point, we're already just feeling behind, so we give up. To be compared to people that we have no real ties to sometimes. The second thing that this trap does is that it creates something that's kind of called there's not a real perfect word for it, but in reality, it's just you sabotaging any opportunity because of your age. And that in itself, it kind of goes back and forth with falling behind, but when you sabotage because you use the words, I'm too old for this opportunity or I'm too young for this opportunity, you automatically are psyching yourself out and you're not even considering your qualities. You're not even considering your skill set. You're automatically taking the easy route and just saying, oh, it's not in my age gap. And that's not true. I took on responsibilities at 15 years old that I see people in their mid-20s and late 20s, and sometimes even in their 30s, that they can't even uphold. So it's not about whether you're too old or too young in certain situations, right? It's really sometimes about your skill set. It's about whether or not have you seasoned yourself enough and created these traits of responsibility to uphold these kinds of positions and opportunities that come into your life. So it doesn't matter the age, it matters more of your character at that point. The third one is genuinely one of my favorites in kind of understanding when you're in this, trap of your age and your identity because of your age. This third one is what I call identity whiplash. It's because you start thinking of everything you have to do. And sometimes you're all these things in 1 hour. You are the corporate leader, the boss, the mom, the PTA person, and the cook or whatever it is, or the wife, the parent, all in like within the hour. And in one moment, your business meeting or you talking to your team requires you to be this corporate, version, composed version of yourself. And then you are rushing to pick up your kids so that you don't get a dirty look from the teacher because you got like 2 minutes late. And then you're just kind of like this human in a carpool line, trying to be fiercely loving and saying, absolutely cut me off, like, because your kids are in the car and you can't say anything else. And then, you're just this entrepreneur at heart. And all of that just wants to make you feel like relentless, right? You think of these things or you see this highlight reel and you just say, man, I really got to go back to my ambition. There's an ambition inside of us entrepreneurs, and it makes us relentless on what we want. And sometimes all of that happens in the same day, in the same hour. Of course, there's a whiplash. Of course, you can start feeling disoriented and not knowing, am I really up for this right now? Am I too old or am I too young to have these experiences or to create these or jump at these opportunities that are coming my way? I say all of this because I want you guys to sit with this. What is that invisible timeline that you created for yourself that is kind of almost impossible sometimes? What is that you've held it to your core like if it's written in scripture? Is it that, you're not supposed to be successful because your parents weren't successful and you already passed that time frame in your life where you could have, hustled a little harder? Is it the feeling of defeat because you're not married yet? Is it the feeling of defeat because you're too young to manage a team that's older than you and you are already psyching yourself out that you won't have influence over them? Or is it the fact that you just can't take the risk on yourself because you really genuinely think that no one will follow you? Sit with it and tell me, what does it really feel like you're battling with this invisible timeline that you gave yourself? Because today I need you to release it. Today I want you to identify, if you do have this age identity trap, identify where your invisible timeline is, and now let's tame it. And let's make your age, exactly where you are, exactly who you are in this season, the most valuable asset that you've got. So I'm going to give you guys a couple instances, I guess, in my life, because we get real here on this podcast, right? I've said this story once, but I remember being 13 and wanting so bad to get a job because I wanted to be financially independent. And I asked my dad for a job. He totally turned it down. He said I was too young. No hate to my dad, but he said I was too young. And I was relentless. I wanted to feel independent, even if I was so young. I wanted to feel like I was contributing, right? And that nobody had to have this responsibility to, pay for my basketball shoes or whatever it was. And I ended up getting a job with my sister. She hired me. And she took a chance on me. And from 13 to 15, I was working, all the time and after school, whatever. And by 15, I became office manager. And I jumped up from just, doing cold calls to now managing an office and managing payroll and allowing people that were much older than me, telling them, me having the power to tell them, yeah, you can take that PTO or no, you can't. It had nothing to do with my age. I was still coming in at, 2:45, 3 o'clock because I had high school. So it really had nothing to do with my age. It had to do with my capability to respect the chances that somebody was giving me and to sharpen the tools that I had and make sure that I was responsible enough with all these opportunities. I felt the same way, being under 30. I think I was like 28, 29. When I held one of my first conferences, was it my first conference? No, I was younger. Yeah, I was younger. I was in like my mid-20s when I held one of my first conferences that I had to speak in public. It was one of my first speaking in public gigs. And I remember doing it and thinking, the first thing was, how are any of these people going to take me seriously? I already look young normally, thank you, Korean skincare. But I also, almost 10 years ago looked younger. And I'm there teaching people and, encouraging them and, talking about business, talking about entrepreneurship, talking about all these different things. And the first thing I'll never forget, it was so clear to me. I was terrified because I didn't think about anything that I had already accomplished. Nothing. That went out the window. The first thing that was just there was my age. Was, can they respect me because of my age? Can they take me seriously because of my age? And it's such a dumb thing to think at that time, but it was the thing that terrified me the most was that. And overcoming all of those things, I remember before I went and had to do all of this, and before I went on my next gig and all these other things, I realized that my age was actually my angle. My age was something that helped me prove my point even more. It helped me, kind of enlighten others in a way that just gave me a better angle than other people that were doing it that were their same age. It was so different. And it expanded, the opportunities for me to reach other people and really expand my level of influence, which was great. And self-improvement has nothing to do with becoming somebody new. It's just realizing who you genuinely are and what you carry and how that can be used for the exact moment in your life. It's interesting because I've seen people stay in situations or in places for too long because they don't know the root of who they are and there's no real personal growth in their life. And I've seen them stay in the same position or the same relationships because they don't know their real value and they don't know their real capabilities to grow. And I mean, I can even resonate with many people now that are single in their 30s. I mean, it is tough out there. But I can resonate with it in a way where, yeah, I can say I'm too young to have had a divorce. I can say I'm too young to have kids right now. I'm 31, turning 32. But I'm not. This is what's given me my edge at this age. This is what's given me the opportunity to not be in something that I shouldn't be in because I finally see my self-worth, because I finally see my value. And if you never see that in yourself, if you don't know your boundaries, if you don't know your self-worth, if you don't have all of these things that your personal growth is so vital to your personal growth, then you're going to stay stuck in something that is never going to propel you. It's always going to anchor you. And you'll never hit a point in your life where you can see success. And it has nothing to do with money. It has everything to do with your peace. It has everything to do with your influence and with feeling like you actually carried out your purpose in life. So, yeah, I could be too young for a bunch of things that have happened in my life. But guess what? Personal growth happens. And that's more important to me, is my peace. It's more important to me is knowing who I am in this moment and who needs to be around me in this moment. And who I need to carry, lift up, and say, we got to start running. Or who I need to let go and say, this isn't for me. Or right now, you can't be a part of this team because we're going over here and you're staying here. Very important to get out of this age identity trap is you have to be able to understand what your boundaries, what your values are as a human, as an individual, and your self-worth in this season of your life. Because all of that would help you make these decisions that are not at all about your age, but everything to do with who you're becoming right now and who you want to become. So we're going to get into, getting away from this, right? How can we reframe ourselves? How can we understand now that age is not our ceiling and it's not our limitation? It's actually just our leverage, okay? We're going to call This part, the age leveraging system. All right. The first part is you have to audit your timeline, and you have to decipher, what is something that you have placed on your timeline because of something you absorbed, maybe growing up or maybe witnessing and being a witness to, because again, you had older siblings, or your parents did it this way, or your siblings did it this way, or your peers did it this way. Separating that from the ones that you actually believe for yourself, or the goals that you actually want to set for yourselves. So you can say, I'm supposed to be married by this age. Or you can just say, well, I want to be married, period. Age has absolutely nothing to do with that. So it's reframing ourselves a little bit, and we got to use that timeline, And trust me, I know that there's things that are more difficult to talk about, like having a kid. I know that that is not something that every woman feels comfortable talking about, because it is complicated and it is hard for us to explain if we're having difficulties trying to have kids, or we haven't found the right partner and we are getting older. It is a science to these things, but I really don't want you to put so much pressure on yourself, especially if you're much younger. I do truly believe that things happen for a reason in our lives, and I genuinely believe that faith can do anything. Your belief in yourself and your belief in God can really do absolutely anything and make anything possible for you. So, not to detour and not to go too far off, but I really want you to kind of look at that timeline and audit those stories that you've told yourself and reframe them. So, I have to have a business by this age in order to be successful. Or I want to be able to be an entrepreneur. Two big differences. Two very big different ways that you can speak to yourself. The second thing for this age leveraging system, again, we're learning how to leverage our age, right? So the second thing I would say is reframing your decade as data rather than making that who you are and making that your entire life and basically making that be the person that you are today. No. Reframing that decade as data, because these are your personal stories, your personal failures, your personal wins that absolutely nobody can give you that information for, but your data, but what you've lived through. And understanding that that is not who you are at all, but it is data. I've been therapied out, and the way that we see our past and the things that have happened to our lives, really, if we don't operate, and I genuinely, me talking, I never viewed it as data. I've never viewed my traumas or my wins or nothing as data. A lot of the times, I would view things that would happen and sit with them and then make that feeling my identity, So if I had hit a big failure, I was just a failure. I did all of this first before I failed at that. I wouldn't see anything other than just a failure, right? And as I started learning more about myself and my self-worth and, who I was and, really just honing into this season of my life, I've realized that everything that's happened to me and everything I've done and everything I am doing, it's data, but it's not who I am. I am not just a divorced single mom. It's what's happened, but it's not to the core who I am. See the difference? You may be thinking, oh my gosh, I'm not wanted. I'm not going to find love. I am unlovable. All of these things because of situations that happen, but that's data. That's just teaching you, because guess what? There are a lot of things that I won't put up with ever again. because I use those things as data. Now, if you don't, and you just start wallowing and thinking of all these things that happen to you, and don't view these situations that happen in your life as data, they will repeat themselves because you haven't audited yourself and realized the deeper meaning. You got to use the information and the things that have happened to you to self-analyze and say, okay, this happened, this made me feel this way, process it, go through it, but then reroute yourself and remind yourself who you are, your self-worth, what your goals are, and who you are going to be. And you use this data to make that version better, not to wallow and never actually go through it, never name anything, and then repeat it again as a cycle in your life. Data is not destiny. That's a big, big difference. It is not where you're going. What you've been through has nothing to do with who you are trying to become. You know, there's factors, but it has nothing to do with who you want to become. It will help you, but again, it has absolutely nothing to do with those deep values and those deep wantings and those goals that you have. Like, I don't care what you've been through. I care if you know what you've been through, you use that, you've worked through it, and know how to never have that happen to you again, and become that version of yourself that you're really wanting to become, that you deserve to become. So I'm going to give you the tools. I'm going to teach you how to walk through this and get out of this age identity trap and really just start seeing yourself differently and using your age to your advantage. So the first thing that I'm going to tell you about is going back to that timeline. We're going to go back to this age, timeline that we invented for ourselves, and we're going to attack it. And how do we do that? I want you to write down 2 columns, okay? And I want you to put in one column what you believe you should have done by now. And then in the next column, I want you to put what you have actually done by this age. And you can put in that column the what I've actually done. You can put what I've actually done that I have not been able to just only plan for, but the things that have happened that nobody warned me about. Those are accomplishments too, that you've been able to get through. I want you to write, side by side and put that down. And you can give me all the petty, comparison things that you've put on the things that you should have had already done by now. Put that in that column. I don't care. And then I want you to really look at it. And I want you to start realizing that you deserve more credit than you give yourself. Because sometimes if people had the opportunity to tell you what a badass you are, you might not even hear it. I was in a meeting earlier today, and I was being told, a bunch of great things. But I didn't see myself that way today. And I'm telling you, in all honesty, today wasn't one of the days that I saw myself as this, incredible mom and incredible badass. I didn't. And it was hard for me to receive that, but I had to check myself and say, whoa, wait, I am. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that with me today. Thank you for saying that to me today. I actually needed to hear that. All of this stuff, it just, what it does, it exposes this inherited expectation that we get from our life growing up to the real stuff that actually happens and that we can actually accomplish that many people have not. It exposes that lie that we tell to ourselves that we haven't done enough or that we, should be doing more. When you write them side by side, you can see, damn, I'm actually kind of freaking great. Might not be the best, but I'm actually pretty great. The second tool I'm going to teach you is the decade data inventory. And basically what it is, it's just, I want you to write down, and I know I'm having you guys give exercises, so maybe mentally write it down, because some of you guys are just not going to write it down, and I get it. I understand. It's rare that we listen to a podcast and we're just writing stuff down. But the truth is, I want you to even mentally note, what are 3 things, at least 3, I can name you a lot, but at least 3 things that right now at your age, you've learned that 5 years ago you didn't know, or couldn't have the opportunity to know. And it maybe had absolutely nothing to do with your age. But in general, like, it's time. We need to go through things in time. List 3 things that at this age you've learned that 5 years ago you might have never been able to. And I'll tell you mine. I learned that I had standards. That's a big deal, you guys. Like, it's a big deal. I learned what my real, like, non-negotiables were in this time right now that I'm in my life. Those non-negotiables weren't the same 5 years ago. Now they are. I didn't know what my standards really were 5 years ago. You know, not that I was this careless person, but it was so different. There was things that I experienced in these last 5 years that only me going through them allowed me the wisdom, and only me having the time to go through them allowed me to have the wisdom to know, oh, that's a red flag. I gotta find my exit. Or that's not for me. How many of you can outright say that to a certain situation in your life? How many of you guys, like, in general, can you say that's not for me in this specific moment? If you can't say that, then maybe you should really start evaluating your self-growth and understanding that these values and this self-worth, like, it's very vital to who you're becoming. The third tool I'm going to tell you is this wrong age mentality. And this wrong age thing is the same thing I've told you earlier, but I'm going to give you the tool to actually learn how to handle this. So if you found yourself again saying, I'm too old for this, or I'm too young for this, ask yourself these 3 questions. Who told me that? What's the actual evidence? And what does my age actually give me here that I'm not using? So many of you guys have watched Squid Games, and I'm going to give you the perfect scenario. I'm not super, familiar, remember the exact first season, but there was that old guy that everybody thought he was going to be gone, first. But that guy used his age and his wisdom to save that whole ass team. At least in one of the things that they had. I think it was the tug of war one that he was, I think it was the tug of war one that he was, using his wisdom and kind of teaching them what they should do. And if you ask yourself these questions, like, who the hell told me I was too young? Is it just me, or is it actually somebody telling me that I'm too young? What is the actual evidence that I am too young to do this? Because I guarantee you there's somebody your age doing it. And then find out what your edge is. Learn. Find out what your edge is. What does my age give me here? Because you never know what it could be. You genuinely can't. I've talked to crowds that are in their 50s and their 60s. And I had no idea that I had something to give. But I took a risk on myself. And I doubted myself in the beginning. But now, 5 years ago, me was scared as hell. Now, put me in a room with whoever. Don't care. I know to the core that my age can give me an edge here. Absolutely. That is what a success mindset is. It's not that you're going to just completely, disappear, or you're going to completely have these thoughts disappear. It's the fact that you're actually challenging yourself to think and say, am I too young, or is this just me talking to myself? You're not giving room to psych yourself out. And the truth is, personal development, there's an easy way to audit that. If you're confused and you're just oh my, you're growing. You're genuinely growing. If you're finding yourselves having to answer questions and learn and things are a little confusing and they're kind of gray and you're kind of being risky, you're growing. If you're super proud of yourself completely and you're comfortable and you're not surprised, you're coasting. You're most likely coasting. Absolutely. If there's nothing getting you excited because you need to learn something new or, create a new way to see this opportunity happen and it's kind of scary and confusing, but you're just kind of oh, that means you're growing. If you're just like unbothered, you might be coasting in that personal development, and you've just gotten real good at looking real busy. And I'm going to leave you guys with this. I've said this a couple times, but I really want this to land. You're not behind. You're not falling. You're not failing. You're just using somebody else's timeline that maybe isn't meant for you. Your challenge this week is to pick one of the tools that we talked about. Pick either your decade data, pick your auditing your timeline, pick one of those, and genuinely just sit with yourself and give yourself an identity statement. Give yourself, hey, I am this person, and I do this, 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 and that. After you at least can give yourself the chance to realize how great you are. You're not too young, you're not too old. You are positioned exactly for what's going to come next to you. So make it a thing. Do this on your own personal free time if you want, but genuinely just please try to give yourself some grace this week. Especially if you're a parent and you're an entrepreneur and you're just trying to figure out all of these things. This age identity trap is something that we find ourselves in, and we rush so many things in our life because we think that we're supposed to do that, because there's this invisible timeline that we gave ourselves. And in reality, we end up falling into something that we shouldn't even be in, or staying in a relationship too long because we think that, we got to give this a try already because we've been at it for a while, and caring about what other people think and caring about their timelines. And that's not a life that's worth living. That's not a life that me as a human and as an individual is worth looking at and saying, I want to follow that person. You want to be somebody of influence. You want to be somebody who's leading. And doing that gracefully has nothing to do with your age, because I am influenced by a 5-year-old sometimes, just as much as I'm influenced by someone who's in their 40s. Absolutely nothing to do with your age. So let this episode be a reminder to never psych yourself out and to give yourself the benefit of the doubt. You're freaking doing awesome. Okay? Before you go, if you know anybody that would resonate with this message and has said those words, I'm too old or I'm too young, make sure, number one, you like and subscribe, and number two, you send them this link, because honestly, I think somebody out there genuinely needs to be told that they're freaking amazing and that life is not too ahead of them, that they're exactly where they need to be. So I'll see you guys on the chat next week.